All right, so obviously I'm not diving today, so I dive out of the back of my pickup. Normally the bed of the pickup would be full of dive gear, but I've just got the stuff that I need to demonstrate how I set up my camera. Before I go into those details, I want to point out a few things that are here. First off is this, they call them X tables. The tech divers use these a lot. I hope you can see them. They're portable. I carry it in my roof rack. I'm not sure they're sold anymore actually, so you might want to get something equivalent. But I use this for my views because my truck is usually full and I'm using my tailgate to get in and out of my dive gear. So I can use it to set up my camera and I can leave it alone, and that's all I use it for. Okay. The other thing I want to call your attention to here is I've got a bucket, not the same one as in the bathroom, and I've got this giant container of water. It's a gas container, but it says water all over it. And I'm gonna use this to rinse my camera after each dive. So I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can do this where you can see it. I'm gonna go ahead and fill this up with water. So if I do 2 dives, I'll rinse my camera, or I'll set my camera in here for the surface interval. Or if I just do the 1 dive, I'll set it inside here, then rinse it off, and then dry it before I head home. So that's just water. So let me reposition the cameras, and then we'll talk about how I actually set up for the dive. So my dive setup with the Vuze camera is still in flux. For these first initial dives, I'm using this tripod, and I have more to say about that. But first I want to get the camera set up. Okay, transported it to the dive site in the case. So I'm going to take it out of the case. I'm going to leave the protective covers on for now. And I need this float. With the camera in it, the dive housing is about £1 pound negative. Now on a tripod that's not necessarily bad, but that would tend to make the tripod top heavy. So I built this snazzy little float out of Divinycell 100 PVC. It's an incompressible PVC foam. I've used it in a number of other camera systems. It does not compress noticeably. I've had it down to like 80-90 feet and I've noticed no compression. So this one is designed to fit under the bottom. It just fits right over. It's got a slot for the latch. So I just slide it in there, and then I screw on one of these handles. Now, so I've got the bottom handle attached. Now the top handle, if you think about it, the way this thing is designed, it's triangular section, so there's 2 halves. Now, what you want to do is you want to mount the handles both to the same half. So this handle is mounted to the half that doesn't have, in this case, that doesn't have switches. So it's mounted to this half. So I want to mount the second handle onto the same half. Now the reason for that is, if you mount it on the other half and you handle it, especially if there's any force, what you're doing is you're applying a force to 2 different sides of the case, and that could compromise the seal. It's a very small chance, but why take any chance? Okay? So, and now I want to start setting it up for the tripod. Let's see, first off, I want to look for the side that has the battery access. The battery access side, it's considered the back of the camera, but what I found is that stitching software will tend, when you stitch it up, it'll tend to put the battery side, or the access panel side of the camera into the main field of focus in the stitch. So 3D Combine does that, AVP does that. I don't know about the HE software, but it may. So anyway, as far as I'm concerned, that's the front of the camera. And so I'm going to set up my tripod so that that's in front. Now that's, the way it's set up, it's on the other side from the Vuze lettering. So I'm going to set up my tripod with that in mind. So this is the effective front. I'm going to set up my tripod attach that way. So I'm just attaching the quick attach to my tripod here. The other thing is, if you notice these handles, they're set up with this top surface is kind of a triangular shape. And what that does is it puts the tripod hole over the center line of the case. So you want to mount it accordingly so that the tripod hole is that way. You mount it via that thing and everything's going to be symmetric and balanced. I've got the float attached. I got the handles attached. Now we're going to go ahead and mount this on the tripod itself. Again, the front, the effective shooting front is opposite that. So I'm going to put my tripod handle toward the effective back. There. Now that's all attached. Okay. So we were talking about people losing cameras. Well, now it's time to deal with that. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to have some kind of a safety lanyard attached to all of my gear, just attaching it to my other gear. So I've got this, little lanyard here. I don't know if you can see that. I'll point it out. I use that on my wrist. But the other thing I use is I got this big spool, this old spool of fishing line. I believe this was like 50-pound test. And I use this as much as possible just to attach one thing to the next. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run a section of this line from the housing somewhere to the tripod. So I'm just looking for somewhere where I can shove it. There's a hole. So, and I just use a standard kind of fishing knot. Just loop it through the same way, like 5 or 6 times. Now, eventually I'm going to go to probably some kind of a selfie pole or a floating stick, kind of like the virtual setup. But I do the same thing. You just want, if something gives up the ghost, you want to at least have one backup so you don't lose it. So I got about 5 or 6 turns there. And then I go down here on the tripod somewhere and I find a hole and I shove it through. There, and then again, just a simple fisherman's knot. Just loop it through about 5 or 6 or 7 times. It doesn't have to be pretty. You're going to cut it as soon as you come out of the water. Anyway, so it doesn't have to last. It's just got to last long enough that if things get loose, you can get a hold of your camera and you have it to bring home. Because otherwise, then you're just relying on those address labels for it to find its way home to you, and that's no fun at all. I've found a couple of my cameras just dangling from the end of this stuff. So it's good. Now, the other thing is, trim these ends pretty close. I had 2 floods in my GoPro housings because the ends of one of these lanyards was getting into the case. And because I was closing the case without my glasses on, I didn't see it. This is going to be pretty top heavy. I know the top is out of your field of view, but what I do is I just wrap a 2-pound ankle weight around these cross pieces. There, you set it down underwater its bottom, the center of mass is low. You can extend the legs to one height, two height, and it's real stable. It doesn't wash over. I forgot, at this point, I would take off all these little protective covers and I would stash them away somewhere, and they're going to stay put away until I'm done with my day of diving, and actually probably until I get home and start putting my gear together. So that means you need to have something to protect the lenses, at least until you get into the water, if not further. Okay, so the first thing I tried was one of these Carhartt beanies, because I figured when I wasn't covering my camera I could use it for my head. So it just goes over, it's very soft, and you can just set the camera up on that, and if it falls off, that's going to provide some protection. A Facebook friend who also has one of these cameras, she recommended this neoprene lunch bag, and this is really cool. It's got handles. She actually takes it and clips it off to her gear, so she'll actually take it into the water. But this, again, it just fits right over. It fits very nicely. It's waterproof, and because it's neoprene, it's going to actually provide more protection for the housing than the Carhartt. A third option, suggested by another Facebook friend, is to get a little baby hat, a little baby cap that has a chin strap. It's beautiful, and it fits over there nicely, and you can tie it on. So that's really secure. That's really a really good suggestion, really cute. I didn't pick one up for this video. The camera's set up. At this point, I would get my gear set up and take it diving. When I'm done diving, I bring it back from the dive. I set the tripod down like this for a few minutes. I get my tanks off, I get my weight belts off, all of that. And then take a knife or my shears or something. I cut the safety lanyard that I just tied up for you. I take the camera off and I dump it in the water. Now I've still got my safety covers on. But anyway, so it sits in the water during the surface interval, at least until I'm ready. And then during the surface interval, if I'm going to do 2 dives, I take it out, I dry it off, and then on the little table that I've got, I'll go ahead and as carefully as can be, I open it up, I inspect the O-rings, I swap my one views for the other. I just swap in the other views because neither camera really has enough juice for 2 dives. And I take a good look at the O-ring, I seal it back up just like I showed you, attach it here, tie it on with a new little length of fishing line, go diving, come back, dump it in the water, and then when it's all done, when I'm all done with the day of diving, I'll take it out, I'll dump the water out, I'll take the camera out, and I'll stick it into whatever camera case I'm carrying it in, or safety I'm wrapping it in. I'll stick it in the empty bucket, and that's what I transport it home in, because it's not real dry at that point. And when I'm home, I'll let it dry out, I'll take it out, I'll transfer the files, and I'll spend the next 2 weeks stitching. I think that's everything I wanted to show you. None of it's really complicated. I hope there's some useful tips in there, and thank you for your attention.